When you read your speeches, the conclusion one draws is that the dogma lives loudly within you.
It's okay to be a religious conservative.
My favorite word is the word. Isn't it a beautiful word when you think of it?
The dogma lives loudly within you.
Let he that has no sin cast the first stone.
He was studying 1 Corinthians 13, which happens to be one of my favorite passages.
The dogma lives loudly within you.
God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble.
Senator, I'm a Christian.
I understand you are a Christian. This nominee is really not someone who is what this country is supposed to be about.
The dogma.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome to a brand new broadcast edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Great to have you in the conversation. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point. Don't forget, you can go to afr.net and get podcasts of any program that's been a part of the AFR Talk Network, including Focal Point. Never need to miss an episode. You can video stream and audio stream the program live on our Focal Point Brian Fisher Facebook page and on our Focal Point YouTube page. Also, the email address, if you want to contact us, probably the best way to communicate with me is through our email address, focalpoint@afa.net. A little easier for me to monitor that than the entire Facebook page because there's so much stuff that gets posted on Facebook. Also, a reminder that you can get my book on fatherhood. It's a book that I've written. It's called The Boy to Man Book, and it's designed for fathers of 12-year-old sons. You know, you look at our culture, and there is no question that what we have here is a crisis of manhood, a crisis of maleness, a crisis of masculinity. We have young males that have no concept of self-restraint. They have no concept of the rule of law. They have no concept of the importance of self-control and self-discipline, of setting an example for others, and all that kind of stuff. So we're missing that. Where do we get? So we need a whole new generation of men in America. We're not going to turn this thing around without a whole new generation of young men who are committed to things like stability and decency and character and good conduct and all those kind of things. Not going to get there. Well, where do we get them? Well, the only place we can get them is from the homes in America. That's where they come from. That's where the breakdown has been, the absence of fathers in the lives of their sons. We need to get fathers back involved in the lives of their sons and being the ones that mentor them toward maturity. That's what the Boy to Man book is all about, a tool to put in the hand of the father of a 12-year-old son, a tool that he can use to mentor his son on the glide path toward maturity. You can get a copy of the book at afastore.net. That's afastore.net. All right, well, let's turn our attention to the Word of God. We are in the book of Numbers. You can read and follow along and pray along with us at pray.afa.net. And that's where we are, number 16. Then there's number 16 through chapter 17. And this is a deal. Remember, this is right after the sons of Korah had challenged God, challenged Moses, challenged Aaron. God called them out, literally called them out. You guys stand in front of the tent with all of your wives and your children, and I will meet with you in the morning, and whoever's left standing after I get through dealing with you, that will be God's man for your nation, God's man for this time. So they all got out in front of the tabernacle, in front of their own tents, and God caused the ground to open up, and it swallowed them all alive, and they went down alive into Sheol, and then the ground closed up on top of them. And that was just a few verses before where our narrative starts today. This is the next day, verse 41. You talk about people that are slow to learn. You know, all of us are slow learners. I think every single one of us are slow learners. We do not learn the lessons from God as quickly as we should, as quickly as we could. Well, here is a major league example. On the next day, all the congregation, that is what was left of the congregation after the Levites had been swallowed up by the earth and sent to Sheol in front of them all, the congregation grumbled against Moses and Aaron, saying, "You have killed the people of the Lord." Well, it wasn't Moses and Aaron that killed the people of the Lord. It was God. Verse 42, when the congregation had assembled against Moses and Aaron, they turned toward the tent of meeting, and behold, the cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord appeared. So they're slow learners. The glory of the Lord appeared, the cloud covered it. What happened the last time this happened? What happened the last time the glory of God appeared, cloud settled on the tabernacle? They all got swallowed up by the ground and sent to Sheol. So you'd think they would have memories could go back at least 24 hours, but apparently they didn't. So they'd seen 500 of their assistant pastors, that's what Levites were, assistant pastors, got swallowed up by the ground opening up. And you think they would figure this out by now, but like you and me, they were slow learners. So verse 44, the Lord spoke to Moses, "Get away from the midst of this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment." I'll snap my fingers, God says, and they will be gone. I will get them out of your misery. Moses, just clear the way, stand back, and I will clear out the problem of this stubborn and rebellious people for you. And Moses and Aaron fell on their faces in intercession before God. Moses said to Aaron, "Take your censer, put fire on it from the altar, lay incense on it, and carry it quickly to the congregation, and make atonement for them, for wrath has gone out from the Lord, the plague has begun." So on the perimeter of the people were starting to die. They were falling over right where they stood. And so Moses was seeing this. He says, "Aaron, you got to get out there right now. You've got to make atonement for the people. The plague has already started. We have to try to stop this thing before it goes any further." So Aaron ran into the midst of the assembly, and behold, the plague had already begun among the people. And he put on the incense, made atonement for the people, and he stood. This is a classic verse. Listen to this. He stood between the dead and the living, and the plague was stopped. Aaron stood between the dead and the living, and the plague was stopped. Now, Aaron obviously couldn't do anything about the dead. Their souls were now in the hands of God. But he could do something about the people that were still alive to keep them from going the way of all flesh. So he took his stand right at the line where the corpses of the victims stopped and the living people began. So he took his stand there between the plague and the people that had not yet been consumed by the wrath of God. He stood in the gap, he made intercession for the people, and he spared them from the judgment of God. Now, I got a couple of thoughts here. One is that what we see here is the power of intercession, the power of people interceding before the throne of God for people that they love and care about. What we see here in this story is people who are in deep trouble and don't even seem to realize it. They have no serious appreciation of the trouble that they're in and the direction that they're headed and what awaits them at the end of that road. So something terrible and ominous is bearing down on them, and we can see it coming, but they can't. You know what I'm talking about. You have people you love and care for, and you can see as clearly as day the path that they're on and where it's going to wind up. And you care for them. You can see it, but they can't. They're blind to it. So what I'm suggesting is maybe we have an opportunity to intervene with God on their behalf, to stand between them and the disaster that is heading right towards them, and intercede with God to stay his hand before they are consumed. We may be the only ones standing between them and the total collapse of their lives, their marriages, their careers, and their families. Maybe we are the only ones standing between them and eternal destruction. Now, here's another thought. How many times have we faced something like this and didn't know it? How many times have we been in a place where God's intent was to consume us, to utterly destroy us because we deserved it, because of our behavior and our conduct and our sins and our trespasses and our indifference to him? He had the power to do it then. He could cause the ground today to open up and swallow up everybody in this listening audience. He did it then. He has the same power to do it today. So we might have gotten ourselves in a place through our disobedience, through our spiritual indifference to God, through self-deception, believing the lies of the world, the flesh, and the devil. But however we got ourselves into that very precarious and dangerous situation, we got ourselves there. And maybe the reason that the worst that could have happened and the worst that should have happened is because someone we didn't even know or don't even know saw the situation we were in, and they cared enough for us to intercede for us. They stood between the living, that's us, and the dead, the plague that would consume us, on our behalf. And we were saved, we were spared. Maybe we still to this day don't even realize what we were on the brink of being consumed by. We were delivered by it. We were spared because somebody interceded for us according to the mercy and grace of God and the name of Christ. And we were saved not because of our righteousness, but solely because of the intercessory prayer of those who loved us. And that's why we were spared. Now, one day, we'll see all of that. You know, when we cross over, we'll be able to look back, review our lives, and we'll see every time we were right on the precipice and we were saved, we were spared, and God will pull back the curtain and he will show us who was praying for us at that very time. Now, let's be sure that we're somebody like that for others who might be on the precipice. Well, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Sovereign Lord, I pray this day for me. I pray for my family. I pray for every man, woman, and child in this listening audience. We pray for our elected officials, for our mayors, for our governor. We pray for our president. Please protect us from making trouble for the leaders that you have placed in authority over us, and keep us from grumbling against them. If any of us are in places of leadership to which you have appointed us, I pray that you will protect us from all unjustified attacks and confirm our leadership in the eyes of others, as you did for Moses and Aaron. May your glory appear on our behalf. May we recognize that we do not need to defend ourselves, for you are our defender and protector. I pray that you will bear fruit abundantly through us. I pray, too, that we will imitate the example of Moses and Aaron and be eager to intercede for those whose disobedience may have made them the objects of your wrath. Through our prayers and intervention, may many be spared the judgment that otherwise would fall on them. Teach us to pray for our enemies, as your Son taught us to pray. Lord, you have assigned different but complementary roles to the sons of Aaron and the sons of Levi. I pray that you will grant each of us a contentment and a satisfaction in the spiritual gifts and ministry you have given to us and the place of service you have assigned to us. I pray that we will be diligent in serving you so that we will always do and carry out things that are according to your instructions and in a way that pleases you. I pray these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay, you are listening to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Donald Trump, by the way, announced an executive order ensuring that babies who survive abortions will receive medical care. Now, that's the executive order, limited reach, but Donald Trump is keeping the promise he made to fight for unborn children. Be right back.
On American Family Radio.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio. Just closing the loop on what I wanted to say about abortion today. Donald Trump issuing this executive order to protect a baby that survives an abortion, to make sure that that baby gets the same medical care that would be given to a baby that wasn't being aborted and was born at the same stage. You know, we are one of the 7 worst nations in the world on abortion, ladies and gentlemen. We are one of only 7 countries that permit babies to be aborted after 20 weeks. You know who else is running with us? This is a sad sack brigade. China does that. North Korea does that. Vietnam does that. So we are as bad as the communist countries who have absolutely zero respect for human life. Now, the Susan B. Anthony list, they sponsored a poll a year ago that found that 77% of the American people support a law that would ensure, it would make sure that babies who survived an abortion would be given the same medical treatment that would be given to any infant that was born prematurely at the same age. And you know, 75% of independent voters and 70% of Democrats agree with that. So let's get it done, Congress. Let's get it done. You know, things are getting worse with Planned Parenthood by the day. We've talked about the number of clinics that they put in minority neighborhoods. Now the number is up to 86%. That's according to townhall.com. Planned Parenthood has located a stunning 86% of its abortion facilities in or near minority neighborhoods in the 25 U.S. counties with the most abortions. So why do they put them there? They want listen to me now, they want every black woman who is pregnant to be able to walk to a clinic where she can kill her baby. That's what they want. This is targeted at minority women, black women, Hispanic women, poor women. They locate them in these neighborhoods because they want it to be available to them, more victims for the butchers of Planned Parenthood. 86% of their clinics in the most populous counties located in or near minority neighborhoods. Journalists are out there. They've made their colors clear. Their professional society, the Society for Professional Journalists, they are actively funding an activist group that urges reporters. This is the Society for Professional Journalists. This activist group urges reporters to mute and cancel feminists and other people who criticize transgender claims. So what this means, ladies and gentlemen, is transgenderism. This is transgender supremacy. This is transgenders being elevated and their concerns above people who are sexually normal. That's what this is really all about. You know, people keep asking Joe Biden whether he's going to pack the court, and he keeps refusing to answer. You know, the Democrats have been talking openly about this. Joe Biden has talked about this openly since 2019 about expanding the court to try to dilute the impact of conservatives and pack it with liberals that are more to their liking. Joe Biden will not comment. They put a lid on Biden again today. So Biden has gone to ground. They put a bag over his head and stuck him in a closet, the 9th time in the month of September that they have done that. Now, Google is weighing in on behalf of non-Republicans. This is a report from Real Clear Politics. Google is pushing conservative news sites way down the ladder in search results. There's been nearly a complete disappearance of Breitbart articles in the results for a search of Joe Biden. You put Joe Biden in the search bar. Well, I'm on Breitbart every day. They publish articles about Joe Biden every single day. Those have virtually disappeared. In other words, you would not even know about what this conservative outlet is reporting about Joe Biden if you use Google. That's why I use DuckDuckGo. That's the name of the search engine that I use, DuckDuckGo. I've abandoned Google years ago. So you can Google the name Breitbart, for instance, on Google, and it still pulls up the website, but it's nearly eliminated from any searches that don't explicitly name it. In contrast, you put a search on the Google competitor DuckDuckGo, it gives multiple links to Breitbart and Joel Pollak's work on the very first page. So again, they're putting their thumb on the scales. And here's the difference it makes. There was a study done by a peer-reviewed study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, which estimated in 2015 that a search engine like Google can impact, persuade, sway, convince more than 10% of undecided voters in an election. Why? Because people that go there, they're not reading an opposite point of view. All they read is what Google wants them to read, which is going to be heavily slanted toward the left. I'll give you an example. In April 4 of 2016, that was 4 years ago, Breitbart ranked in the top 10 search positions. They were on the first page of Google search results for 355 key search terms. As of July 20, 2020, they ranked in the top 10 for one search item. So they went from 355, a visibility for 355 key search terms on the top most searched links on Breitbart on Google, down to one. So media, especially Talking Snake Media of all stripes, doing their part to tip the scales toward Joe Biden. Now, everybody's been talking about this shooting in Louisville, as we should. The suspect of the shooting of these two officers has been identified. His name is Lorenzo Johnson. He's 26, and he fired multiple bullets at officers. And ladies and gentlemen, we are into new territory now. We're into territory now where these protesters, they are packing heat. They're carrying firearms. They're carrying rifles. They're carrying guns. And remember, these guns are in the possession of people that have no self-restraint. They have a very low impulse trigger. They easily can be set off. And they're going to start using these guns like they did on these two Louisville police officers. They're going to start using them on ordinary bystanders like you and me. So we're in a whole new danger zone here. We're headed directly toward guerrilla warfare. If something doesn't happen to stop it, we are going to wind up in full-blown civil war. Like I told you and have been telling you, there will be blood. You know, the rioters in Louisville, they attacked the police as they were trying to put out the fires that the protesters, the rioters, the Joe Biden voters in Louisville were trying to start. So Joe Biden voters in Louisville set fire to the Hall of Justice and other sites around the city of Louisville. And when the police showed up to put out the fires, they were attacked by projectiles. Now, Jeff, I think you've got a read report for us today. Some of you might have seen this business about a U-Haul truck. Jeff, fill us in on that.
Yeah, there was a video that showed up. Many people have seen it. A U-Haul truck showed up and was unloading. Let's see, they had shields, banners, gas masks, and weapons, mostly like bats and sticks and things like that. And immediately I was thinking, you know what, we need to find out who rented that truck. Well, we did a little digging, and it turns out it was Holly Zoller. She rented the U-Haul truck, and actually it turns out she's on the board of the Louisville Bail Initiative. And what they do is they provide bail and get people out, supposedly because of the risk of COVID. But the only people that she is bailing out tends to be the protesters/rioters. I would say rioters because protesters don't get arrested. You have a constitutional right to protest. Here's the interesting thing, though. There are two people on the board of the Louisville Bail Initiative. And they were members of the Soros Justice Fellows, and Holly's one of them. So it looks like this can be tracked directly back to George Soros Foundation and the Open Society.
Yeah, this is George Soros money at work. You know, and everybody wants to know who's paying for this. These people are traveling. These people are moving around. They're going from one city to another. Now, there are local people that get caught up in what they're doing, but you have activists that are traveling around the country, sizable groups of people.
Yep.
You know, they had a hotel room in Rand Paul's hotel in Washington, D.C. Remember on the night of the Republican National Convention, they were harassing people as they were leaving the White House grounds and going back to their hotel. And Rand Paul was staying in a very, very nice hotel, which he can afford. But they were there too. These are street people. These are people running around in raggedy shorts and tennis shoes and cut-off T-shirts. And they're staying in these ritzy, posh hotels in Washington, D.C. Who is paying for that? Well, in part, you can bet your bottom dollar that it's going to be George Soros money at the bottom of this, as well as others.
Yeah, it kind of reminds you, remember those mysterious pallets of bricks that were showing up right before the protests? It's kind of, we're kind of seeing evidence of where the trouble's coming from. Also, we have a phone call. She thought she was speaking to the U-Haul rental place that had some questions about because they were getting an awful lot of questions about who rented the truck. And we have the phone call. It turns out it's pretty funny, actually.
We handed out supplies. That's it.
So you handed out supplies and that was it?
Yes.
What kind of supplies were they, Holly?
Since then, umbrellas, water, masks. goggles,
Nice. 'Cause
gloves.
Holly,
Like-
from what I've seen, people have been sending us, and we've been getting absolutely flooded, Holly, with calls. They're saying we saw signs of people saying abolish the police, defund the
Sure,
police, defund.
that's my First Amendment right.
Yeah,
what
I
does
get
it
it.
matter
I get
what
it,
I wrote
Holly.
on a sign?
I get it. I'm not saying you're in trouble. I just want to make sure we're kind of clear because, like, we have no clue what's going on. I'm sure you have no clue what's going on. It's your First Amendment right to peacefully protest. And once again,
I
that's
didn't even
peaceful.
protest. I just drove a U-Haul truck and dropped items off.
You just
I
drove a
literally
U-Haul
left
truck and
him
dropped
alone
items
after
off,
that.
Holly?
Excuse me?
No, I'm saying, is that what you... No, I didn't hear you breaking up. Is that what you just said?
Uh-oh.
Holly.
She realizes.
Holly, did I lose you?
I'm sorry. You're going to have to talk to my lawyer.
That didn't take long. All right.
Oops. She just admitted that she drove the truck. And actually, she was helping unload this stuff as well.
She was. You know, and these were signs. I mean, it took somebody some time to put those signs together. You can't go down to a sign shop and buy those off the rack. So that indicates a considerable amount of preparation went into that. They were setting the stage to riot in Louisville. Yep. They were all prepared. George Soros paid for them to make these signs ahead of time and get them right next to where the march was going to start so they could just haul them out of the back of the U-Haul van and give them to protesters.
And it turns out the very signs that they were unloading were at the very front of the parade-type protests that did erupt into riots. So.
Yeah. So, you know, the bottom line here, you know, and she's on the board of a pro-bail group, a group that's trying to raise bail for people that commit crimes. That's what they're there to do. Well, Kamala Harris, she also supports a group exactly like that in Minnesota. And she's urging people to fund this thing, and they have provided bail for a number of real total miscreants, people that are sexual felons, and bank robbers and stuff like that. And she has raised bail. Kamala Harris has raised bail. So the bottom line here is that Joe Biden voters are anti-police and pro-crime. That's what they are. Joe Biden voters, they are anti-police. They want the police abolished, and they are pro-crime. And I mentioned this yesterday, but in Seattle, the city council is so determined, they're so pro-crime and so anti-police that the mayor there, the lesbian mayor of Seattle, actually got to the place where she vetoed all of their funding cuts, so all of their funding cuts for the police, she vetoed them. I think she realized, look, my political career could be in jeopardy here if I get caught in the middle of this. So she vetoed them. The rest of the city council overrode the veto, and so the cuts to the defunding of police in Seattle is taking place as we speak. Now, give you an idea how prepared BLM was for this. Everybody wants to think these riots are organic, that it's a movement of the people just spontaneously arising. It's not. There's money and there's organization behind it. There are people that are organizing these protests and organizing these riots. Here's where riots or protests took place last night in America. Washington, D.C., city of Dallas, Texas, Seattle, Washington, Providence, Rhode Island, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Salt Lake City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. One of the protesters in D.C. said, I am committed. This is war. So their intent, they want to set off a civil war, ladies and gentlemen. Their intent on doing this. They're now carrying guns, and as we saw in Louisville, they are willing to use them on the police. You've got riots breaking out in, or protests anyway, in Boston, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Nashville, Tennessee, Washington, as I mentioned, New York, Philadelphia, Atlanta, St. Paul, Austin, Texas, Milwaukee, St. Petersburg, Florida, Los Angeles, Chicago, Detroit, and of course, Louisville. So they've got a regular industry here of mobilizing people to participate in these rallies. They set the police headquarters on fire in St. Louis. Colin Kaepernick weighed in. White supremacist institution of policing must be abolished. You know, they did that in Minneapolis, and the next thing is you've got a member of the city council saying in a meeting, where are the police? People are calling for the police. They can't get anybody to pick up the phone. And when they hear, it takes miles, takes hours for them to show up. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point, the home of the fastest 60 minutes in American media. Buckle up. We are heading for the checkered flag. Let's go to clip number 10. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are big fans of the Say Her Name movement. Everybody's out there trying to compel people to say her name. We're not going to let you move forward until you say her name. We saw some video footage of a car being stopped, and the protesters, the rioters, were blocking the progress of the car, and they told the driver, we're not going to let you go until you say Black Lives Matter. Unless you say that phrase, you're not going to be allowed to proceed. And at first, he resisted them. But there were more of him than there was of him, so he finally said it, and they allowed him to proceed. But they're out there saying, say her name. Got to say her name. That's the big thing. Now, why is that? Why do the Black Lives Matter people want you to say her name? Well, here's a conversation between two BLM leaders. These are official leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement. Co-founder Patrisse Cullors. She's the one that says, look, I'm a Marxist. I'm a trained Marxist. We're both trained Marxists. We don't apologize for that. We're out loud and proud of that. And she's talking to the founder of the Los Angeles chapter of Black Lives Matter, Melina Abdullah. And they're talking here about how they get their work done. Where does the power come from to get the Black Lives Matter work done? Let's clip 10.
We do feel like when we say the names, right? So we speak their names, we say her name, say their names, we do that all the time, that you kind of invoke that spirit, and then those spirits actually become present with you, right? I think it really illustrates what it is you're saying, because we do that often. Some of, and maybe I'm sharing too much, but we become very intimate with the spirits that we call on regularly, right? Like each of them seems to have a different presence and personality. You know, I laugh a lot with Waukesha, you know, and I didn't meet her in her body, right?
Yeah.
I met her through this work.
For me, as we started to lift up the names of our folks in the last 7 years, you know, in some ways, you know, even before Trayvon with Oscar Grant, I started to feel personally connected and responsible and accountable to them, both from a deeply political place, but also from a deeply spiritual place. I believe so many of them work through us, but it's a very important practice. Hashtags are for us are way more than a hashtag. It is literally almost resurrecting a spirit so they can work through us to get the work that we need to get done.
What's happened as we invoke these names is they've really empowered and inspired the movement. Look at the way that the invocation of George Floyd's name has cracked the entire world open.
So there you have it. They are summoning. Now they may think they're summoning the spirits of friends, they're not. They are summoning spirits from hell itself. So when you look, what they're admitting is these spirits that we invoke, these spirits that we summon into our bodies, that we commune with, that we talk with, we are relying on them and the energy that they provide to get the work done that we need to get done. So what that means, ladies and gentlemen, when you look at the work of Black Lives Matter, you are looking directly at the work of Satan himself, unvarnished, plain for everybody to see. They're admitting it. This is done by the spirits of the dead. That's how they're getting things done. That's kind of spooky if you ask me. So that's why there's all this say her name business. Every time they say the name of a departed person, they are giving power to that spirit. Just like when we call on the name of Christ, we empower him. We are inviting him to work. We're giving him liberty to work. We're inviting him to work on our behalf. They're doing the same thing. There are limitations in the spirit world. Spirits just can't go and do what they want to do on their own. They have to be invited. They've got to be summoned. So that's what these Black Lives Matter folks are doing, summoning these people to do their dirty work for them. Now let's grab some sound bites. Let's go to clip number 1. This is the Attorney General for the state of Kentucky. His name is Daniel Cameron. This guy's a guy to keep an eye on. He's black, but he had no hesitation about following the law instead of the Black Lives Matter political agenda. It's very clear what they wanted. They wanted murder charges, just like they got murder charges filed against George Floyd because they insisted on it. And there was no attorney general in his right mind that was not going to file murder charges against George Floyd, whether they were merited or not, because the fix was in. You got to charge him with murder. We insist on it. We demand it. They were doing the same thing with Daniel Cameron. He said, no, I'm going to follow the law. I'm going to follow the evidence. Here's clip 1.
There will be celebrities, influencers, and activists who, having never lived in Kentucky, will try to tell us how to feel, suggesting they understand the facts of this case and that they know our community and the Commonwealth better than we do. But they don't.
But they don't. So basically, he's saying, I'm just going to follow the law. That's my job. I'm the Attorney General of the state of Kentucky. My job is to follow the law. It's not to carry out some kind of political agenda. It's not good enough for Black Lives Matter. So I think probably this guy, we need to be concerned for his safety because he is now the #1 enemy of Black Lives Matter, even though he himself is black. Let's go to clip number 2. Here's an activist talking about Daniel Cameron, the AG of Kentucky.
What I saw this morning was a Bull Connor speech in 2020. And you're right. Unfortunately, it was being given by a black prosecutor.
That was Bull Connor. You know, Bull Connor was the sheriff in the South that turned the fire hoses and the police dogs on blacks who just wanted to enroll their kids in school. That was Bull Connor that did that. Now he is this Daniel Cameron being equated to Bull Connor. Now Jalen Rose, you may be familiar with that name. He was an outstanding college player at University of Michigan, part of the Fab Four, I think. At any rate, he went on to have a NBA career. Now he's a commentator on NBA. They're having the NBA Finals. Nobody's paying any attention to him. Everybody's just tuned them out. They're killing their own franchise. I mean, it's like they're kneecapping themselves with all this social justice warrior nonsense. Now here's Jalen Rose. This is on a national telecast. He's doing this live on ESPN. Listen, clip number 3, Jalen Rose.
J. Rose, Tyler Hero scored in double figures every game this postseason?
He's been putting in work for a young fella, but it'd also be a great day to arrest the cops that murdered Breonna Taylor.
Okay, on ESPN, as far as I know, hasn't gotten into any trouble for that. So he's not only the prosecutor, he is the judge, he is the jury, and he is the judge. He's found them guilty of murdering Breonna Taylor. And speaking of there will be blood, let's go to clip number 4. This is Black Lives Matter. These are Joe Biden voters in the street in Louisville yelling at the cops.
So y'all get ready to die.
Y'all better get ready to die, with an expletive deleted to make it suitable for family radio. All right, I want to read a little bit from a column by Andy McCarthy, who is, I think, the finest legal mind in America. I try to read every single thing that he writes. He's one of the men that's argued there is no such thing as systemic racism. He's got another column up today. Says if you think there is systemic racism, you have an obligation to prove that. Where is the evidence of that? Where is the proof? In fact, it's the other way around, even in the justice establishment. He worked in it for years, decades, Andy McCarthy did. And he said, look, even in the Justice Department, when you have prosecutors that are going after, attorneys that are going after defendants, they bend over backwards to plead cases out to softer versions of the criminal's conduct's harsh reality. They do so precisely to rationalize the avoidance or reduction of jail time. In other words, they bend over backwards to cut these criminals a break. So where is the systemic racism in that? But you press people, where are the racist things that you have observed? Racist things that have been done by your colleagues, they can't come up with anything. They claim that their clients were arrested because of their skin color, but it turns out that their crimes were supported by abundant proof. They have victims who are disproportionately black and Latino. In other words, the people who are the victims of their crimes are minorities. So when we call for law and order, we call for an increased police presence, we are the ones that are protecting minority interests because they are the victims. Black on black crime in minority neighborhoods is huge. It's off the charts. The vast majority of victims of crime in minority neighborhoods are victims at the hands of other blacks. What they want is protection. They want the ability to defend themselves. They want a police presence that they can call. So people that say there's systemic racism, they can't cite any concrete evidences of it. So I think it's a very good point that Andy McCarthy makes. Now, here's what I want to finish with. This has to do with the Breonna Taylor case and whether homicide charges should have been filed in this case. Here's Andy McCarthy's breakdown of this deal. So I'm going to try to read some of this to make sure you get it straight from his mind into your brain. The two officers who actually shot Mrs. Taylor a total of 6 times, that's how many times she was shot, 6. They weren't charged. The only one who was charged was Brett Hankison, and Andy McCarthy believes his prosecution is merited because he was firing wildly from the parking lot. I mean, he heard firing. He heard his colleagues being attacked with gunfire, so he fired, but he fired wildly through the bedroom window, and fortunately nobody was hurt. But bullets that he fired wound up in adjacent apartment buildings, adjacent apartments. Now, the sergeants that reported, John Mattingly and Miles Cosgrove, this was not, by the way, a no-knock warrant. You've heard that. This wasn't a no-knock warrant. And they were firing in the dark because her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, was shooting at them. They identified themselves. They knocked on the door. No response from anybody inside. They had no option. They had a legal, valid, verified, authorized search warrant. They have a legal obligation to fulfill it. The only way they could do it was to break through the door. As soon as they did, Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, this Kenneth Walker, shot at the police, hit one of them in the leg. That was the first shot fired. It wounded a police officer. And this location was tied to a notorious criminal, a drug dealer by the name of Jamarcus Glover, who was a former boyfriend of Breonna Taylor. And Attorney General Cameron did not prioritize mob violence over the law and over the evidence. He followed it where it led him, which was to exonerate the two officers that fired in the apartment itself, down the hallway, dark hallway. They couldn't see it. Breonna Taylor was back in there. Some people think maybe that she was trying to serve as a shield for her boyfriend, that once the police saw that there was a woman in front of him, they wouldn't shoot, and the chances are very likely that they wouldn't have, but they couldn't see her because he was shooting at them in the dark. The police did not execute a no-knock warrant. They knocked and announced themselves as police before forcing entry shortly after midnight. There are witnesses that verify that. When she was killed, Breonna Taylor was a hospital emergency room technician who had hoped to become a nurse, but over the years, she'd gotten involved with Glover, a twice-convicted drug dealer. She was entangled in frequent police investigations of Glover. She remained romantically involved with him, even though he spent years in prison. She agreed to rent a car for him in 2016, and she ended up interviewed in a murder investigation. And he was repeatedly arrested while they were in a romantic relationship of drug charges. I got more here. Maybe I can save it for tomorrow. But she's not this pristine angel that Black Lives Matter people want you to believe. She was up to her earlobes in police investigations, even including murder investigations. And it couldn't have been a matter of her simply being at the wrong place at the wrong time in every one of those cases. So clearly, this decision not to prosecute these two police officers for murder is clearly justified. The police officer that was prosecuted has kind of a troubled history with police misconduct, and a prosecution in his case seems evidently deserved. So that's the straight scoop from Louisville. Bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap. Never forget, with God's help, we are fighting a winnable war. See you tomorrow.